myself and Natalie are just going to walk you through some things that you might want to think about when considering applying for the Roosevelt Scholarship. So let's click us through. There we go. So I'll start. My name's Rachel Armitage. I was a Roosevelt Scholar back in 2016, so it's been a little while now. But as you can see, still involved because it just really is a life-changing experience. So I went out and researched approaches to voter registration during the 2016 presidential election, which, as we all know, was fairly uneventful. So not much to explore. But yeah, so of course I had a very interesting time and came back and decided to go into further study based on what I'd learned. And I just wrapped up a PhD last year, and now I work for Ofcom. So I work in regulation of social media and kind of the public sphere, basically, which is connected to what I did my scholarship in. So I'll hand over to Natalie to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm Natalie Rudy. I was a 2021 scholar. However, due to COVID, I didn't actually go on my trip until 2022. I researched socioeconomic development strategies and how hard to reach communities are engaged into employment, enterprise and education. So I was there for 6 weeks, visited some non-profit organisations, youth organisations, and visited libraries across each state that I went to see how they were supporting people into employment, into business and adult education. So I've been back just over a year, and I've taken on 2 secondments within Nottingham City Council, one which was more kind of involved in managing libraries, one that was in major projects at Nottingham City Council, and next week I'll be starting a new role as a business and skills advisor with Inspire, so back in the county. Yeah, so fantastic experience, all go since I've been back, but finally just kind of starting to settle down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fairly normal experience when people find when they come back, they just hit the ground running and so many doors have opened for them. So yeah, really exciting news. Congrats on the new job.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll move on for you. So the agenda for tonight, Natalie and I are going to talk you through a little bit about the scholarship, then this year's application timelines and top tips, how the scholarship supports you if you're successfully appointed, and then kind of contact details and next steps. If you want to consider things, go away, get in touch with any of us, you can do that. And then obviously Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Natalie.
Okay, so we'll just talk a little bit about the scholarship. I'm sure most of you have done your research anyway, but I'll just give you a bit of information. So it was established in the 1940s as a memorial to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. So each year it sends between 1 to 3 scholars, and you're able to travel across America for between 6 to 12 weeks, depending on, you know, how long you want to go for, work commitments, things like that. And incredibly, we've had over 200 scholars that have been sent out to America, which is pretty incredible, really. And I think, Rachel, you would agree that very proud to kind of speak about the scholarship and be one of those part of that number of people that have been. So we were supposed to be able to take control of the slides, but unfortunately because of technology we can't. So Rachel, if you want to skip to the next one. So the criteria is aged between 21 and 35. It was 30, and over the last few years it's just changed to 35, which is great, because I didn't think I could apply, and I actually applied on the year that I was turning 35, so it was fantastic news. You should be living or working in Nottinghamshire, so not just the city, it's across the whole of the Nottingham County, and preferably in employment. I do know some people may have applied who have been in between employment or taking some time off, so it is worth applying anyway, and just having those conversations if you're not currently in employment. But we do prefer people to be in employment or know where they're at in terms of their career and employment. So why you should apply? I mean, there are a million reasons, but we've tried to get it down to 3 bullet points. It is an incredibly unique personal development opportunity. As I've kind of mentioned, that first year of coming back, I've stepped into roles that I would never have dreamed of. I managed 7 libraries and 50 members of staff. That was within 2 weeks of coming back from the trip. I was offered that role. Never managed anyone or anything in my life, and wouldn't have probably stepped into that role had I not had this opportunity. And the confidence, and like Rachel said, the resilience, the experience that you get, it really is a unique experience. I know, you know, a lot of people do go traveling, but to be able to go traveling with an aim and with purpose, and with something in mind, and you know, your project in mind, it's a really amazing experience. Like I've just said, it can boost your career and leadership potential, not just, you know, as soon as you're back, but in the future going forward. I mean, when we have the events, we get to speak to past scholars from, you know, the 80s, 90s, and seeing their journey, hearing their journey and where they've gone since they've been on the scholarship is really inspirational. And unforgettable experiences traveling across America. As you can imagine, each state is different, the people you meet are different. You know, you just have some really incredible experiences. And we do encourage people, obviously, that you go in there to do your research, but we do encourage people to, you know, really enjoy themselves and to embrace the culture. You know, visit landmarks, you know, have an experience, have a personal experience. So yeah, next slide. So I am now handing over to Rachel, and she's going to go through the application process.
Yeah, so this is the nitty gritty. If hopefully that's convinced you that it's worthwhile considering applying, even more so than you turning up tonight. Maybe you've got inspired to apply now. So the details for that. This year's application timeline, the application process this year is opening earlier than it has done previously. So the 1st of December, I think that's next week now. So about 10 days to think about it, really get those ideas going. You'll have over the Christmas period and into the beginning of February to get your application done. So 2 months, hopefully a good window of time to get something in. And then pretty soon after that, we'll get the interviews going. So that it's a 2-stage interview process. So we create a long list, we do a first round of interviews, and from that first round, we create a short list. The second round of interviews, usually there will be trustees involved and local dignitaries, because as part of the scholarship, you are a representative of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, so they have their say as well about who gets appointed. And then we'll let you know shortly after that. It's usually within the week, whether you've been successful for the year. And the hope for this year, what we really want to encourage, obviously, you know, COVID isn't completely behind us, but travel is a bit freer now. So we would hope and encourage people, after you've been appointed in March, to get planning, get your itinerary sorted, and go out for your trip before the end of 2024. So it will be about a year, the whole process from application to going and returning, hopefully, if you're successful. So application stage, when you are completing the application, which I think you can find on our website. I know Ellie probably can't hear us, but we'll make sure that you are linked to where you can find the application. The important thing you need going into that is a solid idea of what your project is and why you want to be selected. So it needs to be a fairly fully formed concept. So essentially, when we interview, we're judging what is the value of this project for this person in their career, but also for Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. So can you tick all 3 of those boxes? Can we see that it would be a good personal development opportunity for you, but also that the things that you're learning are going to benefit the local area when you return? So there you go. What benefits would it bring to you personally and professionally? You know, we want to see people who are confident, and we are confident in sending them out as representatives, but also where we can see that it would have some real personal development opportunity for them, that there's things that they want to improve for themselves. There's areas where they think they could get better, networking, presenting, whatever that might be. And if we can see that, that's a good thing because we know how it might help, but also how does that address the needs of the area? So it's got to be good for you, and we want to be able to see that. But when it comes down to it at the end of things, if we have a couple of really good candidates, it often gets prioritized based on, what's the value of the project to the area. So really think about pulling out what your current role is, why you need to do this research project, what the advantage would be for your employer, for yourself in your job, but also for the local community. And an important part of it as well, if you can fit it into your application, is to talk about how you'll share your findings when you get back. So hopefully your employer, if you're not self-employed, if you have an employer, they will be supportive of your application. That's always a good thing. You can talk to them about the advantages it will have for them, and also maybe get some stuff set up before you return to talk about sharing your findings, so we know that they're going to have an impact. So that's the main things to consider in your application. First interview, like we saw on the timeline, it's usually kind of 50 minutes to an hour, so it sounds quite a long time, but just to make clear, it's largely conversational. We're not kind of really grilling you. We like to have a chat with people. There's usually 4 or 5 people on that panel, so it is normally overwhelmingly people who've been on the scholarship before, or at least people who are heavily invested and involved in the scholarship. So we all know what it takes. We've all been on the other side of the desk, and we all know what it takes to win the scholarship and to go on the scholarship. And there will be some, as much as we'll talk about your project, we'll also talk about some broader things. So part of that is an understanding of US and UK current affairs, to make sure that you won't get tripped up if somebody's asking you about something whilst you're abroad. Your understanding and experience of Nottinghamshire. So obviously you don't have to be born here, you just have to be living here. But what is it that you like about being someone who lives in Nottingham? What advantage do you have from being here? Definitely information about your project. So as we were saying, why is it valuable? Is it practical? And where you see it taking you down the line. So if you can have a sense of kind of that future ambition, that's helpful for us as well to kind of judge if your project is a winner. Second interview seems again this year be taking place in County Hall. So obviously that's quite fun to get to go to the building, and like I say, there's usually a dignitary or 2 on the panel. Some of those are our trustees, so they kind of help us oversee and manage the scholarship. At that interview, if you get through onto the shortlist, you're usually asked to give some kind of a presentation. So people usually have some handouts. I think there's usually capacity for slides if you want to give those, but probably think of it more as kind of talking and having things to hand out and hand around. And then we'll have kind of further, maybe more probing questions about your project if we had queries from it previously. So we would recommend, if you do get shortlisted, go away, do a little bit more thinking, do a little bit more work on the project, so that when you come back, we can see that it's developed since we spoke to you the first time around. That's always handy too. What makes a successful application? Definitely passion about your projects. Having a clear plan of how you're going to share what you found when you get back, so we know it will have impact. Making clear where the relevance and the importance to Nottinghamshire lies. Specific detail and ideas about the trip is really good advice. There is usually somebody who comes in every year and has got a rough itinerary, not to the extent that they've started booking hotels, but they've researched the people that they might want to speak to. They have a rough idea of what their route might be. They've looked at the practicalities of it. So if that's your competition, that's probably what you're going to want to be thinking about presenting, to make sure that you're up there and you're competing with the best. And make it personal. Yeah, we want to know why it's going to benefit you and why you are the person that we should send over and above any other applicants. So I'll hand back over to Natalie now.
Thank you. Can you jump on to the next slide for me, Rachel? Thank you. Okay, so induction and mentoring. So anyone who's successful in being awarded the scholarship will be paired with a mentor, which will be a previous scholar. And that mentorship will begin before you go away and then throughout your trip. So the mentor can support you with developing your project, putting your itinerary together, just to be like a soundboard if you've got any questions. They might also be a really good source of contacts in America, having already been around the country. And like I said, whilst you're on the trip, they're a really good kind of point of contact to just go back to. I'm currently mentoring one of our scholars who's out at the moment, and I've been catching up with her and, you know, just checking in, seeing how she's doing, and if she's needed anything, she's been able to check in with me. And then the induction. So the scholarship kind of starts before you even go out on your trip. And I think one of my favourite bits before I went out was the historical tour of Nottingham, which when I went was Rachel's mum. I'm not sure if that's still the case. Yeah, she's a fantastic tour guide. Um, so being born and bred in Nottingham, you kind of, you know, if you're born in any city, you kind of think you have an idea of what's the history of Nottingham. But that tour was very eye-opening, interesting, and yeah, quite amusing, some of the facts that I learned. So you would spend a few hours touring the city, and you know, you would hit spots like the castle, Market Square, the lace market, and just find out more information which would be useful for you to share when you're out in America, because you will get a lot of people ask questions about the city, about your knowledge of the city, what it is that you love about your city. So it's really good to have those pointers as well. Another fun part is a trip to the US Embassy, which is down in London. And you kind of have a tour of the embassy. Again, you get to share your ideas and your projects with the team at the embassy. We had lunch with them, which was really nice. It made it a lot more informal. We had to sit down and they asked loads of questions about, you know, what I do, why I do it, why I wanted to go on this trip, but also gave me a lot of recommendations on places to go, and more of an insight into America, and you know, the politics and things like that. And then meetings with city and county council representatives, so the mayor, Sheriff of Nottingham, the chair of the county council. So you'll go and have engagements with them at a time that suits you all. Again, share with them about your trip. They might ask you some questions, but it's also worth asking them a lot of questions. They, you know, might have things that they want you to find out, or they might have interests that they, you know, would like you to feed back to them. They may also have recommendations, and being actively involved within the city and the county, they might have some insight into what they feel the city could use, or you know, information that might be beneficial for Nottingham. So again, really interesting and useful visits that really set you up for your trip, because a lot of your trip is going to be meeting with those organisations, setting up those interviews and meetings. So it's a really nice kind of introduction into that process. Yep, next slide. So expectations on your return. So as I said, the scholarship starts before you go. But then when you get back, we do expect that you present your findings, like Rachel mentioned earlier. We do have an annual celebration event that we hold at different venue every year. And we normally have the scholars that have just been come and feedback and give a presentation. So there'll normally be somewhere that you could present some slides and give an overview of, it doesn't have to be your full report, but just an overview of where you've been, you know, what you enjoyed, what you found, who you met. So you can kind of focus on what element of your trip you want to. And we do expect people to join the management team as well, in some capacity. So it's really nice when you're part of the management team, because it kind of changes. You don't get stuck in one position. It's not a static experience. So I've been working on the social media. Now I'm kind of doing some mentoring, and then because of my new role, I'm going to take some time out and then come back in the new year. But there are a lot of different opportunities, event management, looking at, you know, fundraising, things like that. So it's a really good opportunity. It's really good for your career development and personal development, and it's a great way to continue to be a part of the scholarship and see how the scholarship grows, to see everybody's ideas and everyone's research projects are different, and it's always really interesting to see, you know, what the new scholars want to research and what they're doing, what their experiences are. So it's a really nice way to kind of continue that involvement and supporting new scholars, and also seeing the previous scholars and seeing their kind of development and their progression, and where the scholarship is sending them. You can also volunteer, so we have events and stuff, and make donations and keep in touch. So we have a newsletter that you will be added to, and of course, if you want to opt out of that at a later date, you can. We have our website, which I'm sure many of you would have already visited before joining us today, and we have, you know, all of the social media links. So we've got LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and X, and we try and post on there often if we've got events coming up. We try and post the scholars that are out on their visit, keep up to date with what they're doing, so their pictures and just updates of what they're doing. So it's worth kind of following to see what other people have been up to and what events we've got coming up.
So I think we can probably throw the floor open to any questions if you like. I would preface this by saying I've never yet met a Roosevelt scholar who doesn't want to talk about their experience. So we'll happily talk to you about the application process, but if you want to talk to Natalie or myself, or if Ellie's got sound back and wants to contribute, if you want to talk to us about what we actually did as well, please feel free to. So I wonder, does anybody have any specific questions, queries that we haven't covered that you would like to find out about that we can help you with?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi.
I can.
Yeah. Good. Perfect, thank you. I'm just wondered about when you actually sort of get in for the scholarship, what's the process of like balancing the time between sort of having time off work and, you know, when you've actually got to go out. I know you probably agree to 6 weeks off of work and stuff, but sort of all the other bits and bobs, do you get like an allowance of time off, or I don't know how it works really?
No, great question. It's obviously important practical thing to be able to know and to factor in. So obviously we can't, as the scholarship, go to your employer and say, please give her a day a week to plan this. We don't have the kind of the pull to do that. But obviously it is important going into the project that you have the backing of your employer and that they're happy to kind of let you go and hopefully come back, because that's part of the point of the scholarship, is that you've got something to give. So you know, your employer ideally needs to be supportive. With that said, I think most people plan kind of in their spare time. I would say, and I'll ask Natalie to come in on this in a mo, but I found that it was manageable to do that. I know 6 weeks seems like a long time, but a good bit of advice from me is not to plan your full 6 weeks, right? Pull together a list of contacts of places that you want to go in a rough route. That's really well advised. But what I ended up doing is making sure that I was only ever planned a week in advance. So that meant that when I went somewhere and somebody went, oh, have you talked to this person? And I hadn't, instead of having to go, well, I can't go and see them because I've got everything planned to the letter, I was able to flex my plans a little bit. So there is work to do before you go, undoubtedly, but I think all of us have generally found that you will have the time to do that in kind of hopefully evenings and weekends. And I know people have got different commitments as well, but you'll find the time to get that planning in. outside of work hours, and then kind of away you go. Natalie, have you got any kind of a different angle to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, everyone's employer is different. What I did, my employers were really supportive, but what I did was put a proposal to my employer as I was doing my application. And I know, you know, Rachel discussed having a clear outline of why you think it will benefit not only yourself, but your employer and the city. So I think that having a kind of strong case for your employer and just, you know, explaining to them why it could benefit them. For me personally, that went a long way in them supporting me. So I did use some holidays for, you know, like going to visit in London. I was there for the whole day, so I used some holiday to do that. But then things like going to visit the county council, if I was only there for a few hours, my employer was happy to just kind of support that in work time as part of my CPD. So I think it's about being really, you know, being transparent, being open, and working collaboratively with your employer to see what it is that they want out of it. So with my proposal to my employer, I actually asked them what it is they would like to see, and I incorporated that into, you know, my research so that I had something tangible for them when I came back. So I delivered a presentation to the heads of the libraries across the city and county, and kind of made some recommendations based on my time spent within the libraries. So that's kind of my advice on that, is just to have those conversations with your employer. But no, we don't really influence that. But again, that all adds to, you know, build the character building of that negotiation and those conversations, and identifying areas of development for, you know, everybody that's kind of involved in this process.
I think it's worth saying on that
Thank
note
you.
as well that, sorry, Laura. Yeah, it's worth saying on that note that obviously you do get an allowance. So, you know, it depends with your employer. Some people are salaried when they go, and some people take it as unpaid leave. Obviously, that your personal circumstances, you kind of have to figure out what works best for you. But we do give you an allowance during your time out there. You know, we can't claim it's going to cover everything, but we will cover the cost of your flights to and from the States. Internal travel, you kind of have to negotiate, and you have an allowance. I'm afraid I'm not 100% sure what that is any longer, but I know that Ellie should be able to fill you in on what that amount is. And that, you know, helps you go some way towards getting your food and accommodation and things. On which note, I would probably point out as well that this trip is likely to be cheaper than your average holiday, because a lot of people end up doing things like staying for free with hosts. So we recommend the Servas program to people, which is a network of people internationally who will host you for free. And they're honestly some of the loveliest people you can meet. And it's not just hosting they'll give you your meals, they'll give you tours, they'll give you all kinds of things. And I know, Natalie, you ended up doing some pet and house sitting that gave you free accommodation. So
Yeah,
there are considerations in that vein as well.
Yeah, I did. As I said, I went straight after COVID, so there were quite a few hosts who weren't yet ready to have people in their house, in their homes, and it was the start of summer holidays as well. So people were kind of off on the holidays or preparing to go on holiday, so they didn't want to potentially expose themselves to COVID. So I found a site called Home Sitters, which I looked after people's houses whilst they were away on a trip, whether that be for 2 days or for a week in one instance. So that was a bit of a lifesaver for me in the end. But again, that's what your mentor, it can help you navigate in those early conversations.
Exactly that. And you know, your mentor will also know who within the existing scholar community, if they don't know themselves, just like I've gone, oh, I'm sure Natalie did some home sitting, they'll be able to contact somebody else in the network to get you that information and that advice. I'm just looking at the typed questions here. So we got one from Sophie. I work in Nottingham, but I don't live full time in Nottinghamshire. Will this affect my eligibility? No, it shouldn't do. I know the criteria might look a little bit confusing, but it's live and or work in Nottingham or Nottinghamshire. So if you are working here It's probably super helpful because we know that your work is going to directly impact Nottingham, even if you don't necessarily live here. So we just want to know that you have some grounding, some roots here in Nottingham, so that when you come back from your project, the local community is likely to see a benefit. That's really what the requirement is. So on the basis of what you've said, Sophie, I think you're perfectly squared away to apply, and please do if you're considering it. Natalie, do you want to take the question from Nushin in the chat? She says, is this program open to uni students?
I believe so. Am I right in thinking it is?
I think, Ellie, if you can hear us, you might have to confirm. My last understanding was it's not open to uni students, okay, unless you're also in employment. So I think we would ask that people get to the end of a degree and then get into employment and then apply. But obviously, if you're maybe part-time student, part-time working, and you want to apply on the basis of your job, then we would encourage you to do that. There has been a couple of kind of wiggly lines in the past about people using it as a way to advance or finish up their studies, and it's more meant as something to kind of kick off your professional development, so it tends to happen after the uni process. Yeah, okay, good, remembered that one. Okay. Mm-hmm. Have we got any other questions? Just seen that Ellie's flagged about the allowance. That's going to be discussed at tomorrow's AGM meeting. So if you do have concerns about that, or you want that confirmed, the management team will be able to confirm that after tomorrow. Do we want to share a highlight from our trips? Yeah, go on. Natalie, anything immediately forthcoming whilst I rack my brain back 7 years?
I mean, the whole thing was amazing, but the highlight of my trip was actually looking after people's houses because they came with pets. So for me, that was really nice. And I would say my favourite pet was a little dog called Piccolino. I had to spend a week in Austin, and it was quite difficult because I was supposed to be staying with a family in LA, and unfortunately they cancelled because of COVID. So I had to do a detour, and I ended up going to Austin. So I was kind of not stressed, but a bit like, oh, what am I going to do? And so then I got to spend a week with this beautiful little dog Piccolino, and he was like my best mate for the week. And managed to have some really good meetings actually in Austin. It was kind of all last minute, and they had a really nice library there as well with a cookbook cafe. So the cafe and the library was just full of cookbooks. So yeah, Austin was a great experience for me.
What do they say about Austin? Keep Austin weird, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Clearly they did. Gosh, my highlight. Again, I know it sounds kind of cliche, but there really are too many to list. So I'm going to pick the one that always comes to me off the top of my head. Is there was a congressman in the States called John Lewis, who sadly passed away last year, I think. But he was really at the forefront of the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, and he was kind of the chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he was at the Selma to Montgomery marches. You know, this man was kind of viciously beaten by the police as all part of this peaceful protest for civil rights. And one of the people that I ended up getting to know out there happened to know Congressman Lewis and happened to work within Congress. So he was like, come on, we'll just go by his office. And I was like, I don't think you just walk up to icons of history, do you? And apparently you do. So he took me along to the congressman's office, and he wasn't there, but I walked in and he had all the pictures on the wall of like him shaking hands with like Nelson Mandela and Barack Obama and all this kind of thing. So that was overwhelming enough as it was. And as we left, he was coming back to his office and we bumped into him, and I had about 2 minutes just talking to him. And it was really, really powerful, really amazing moment that would never have happened if I just happened to be in DC by myself. It's because I was there on this incredible scholarship that I had the pass basically to get to know this first person who worked in Congress, who then went, okay, yeah, I'm going to invest some time in you and make sure you have a good experience, and who was then able to introduce me to these amazing power players and key historical figures. So, you know, whoever the John Lewis is in your field, there's every chance you'll end up meeting them if you go away on the scholarship. There's another question from Sophie here. So we've got, can you break the trip up, or do you have to do it all in one go? Full 6 weeks or full 12, depending on the type you apply to. Natalie, do you want to take this one?
I would say that we would expect that you would do the trip in full in one go. So if it were that you can't do the full 12 weeks and could only do 6 weeks, it would be just the 6 weeks that you go for, because the scholarship does pay for your travel as well, for your return flight. We wouldn't do that on 2 occasions. So I mean, I only went for 6 weeks because I that was what I negotiated with work. So yeah, if I mean 6 weeks, America's a big place, but you can still do a lot and have a lot of experiences. So yeah, I hope that's answered that for you. Yes, it is better for the environment.
Yeah. I don't think we have Sam with us on this call, but one of our previous scholars, her entire project and her passion and her career is based around sustainability. And I can't remember if she ended up doing this, but she was talking about getting a boat instead of flying because she was so concerned about her carbon footprint getting over to the States. I think she might have done. I think she might have taken a boat over. So yeah, there's options. We'll pay for your travel out there, however you decide to get there, but it will eat into your time if you decide to take a cruise liner across the Atlantic Ocean. But yeah, is there anything else we can answer for you folks whilst you've got us? Do bear in mind as well that if anything comes up after this meeting and you've had thoughts, you can absolutely get in touch.
Can I ask how many applicants you normally get?
You can. It varies year to year, and I haven't been part of the application process, the sorting process, for a couple of years now. But I can confidently say we're into like strong double digits. So you know, there is some competition, and we usually would invite, oh gosh, I don't know, I think Russ was on this call earlier, so he might be able to chip in with more recent information, but I think the long list can be kind of 10, 7 to 8 for the first interview. I was going to say around 10. So obviously there's people that we've filtered out by that stage. Then we have kind of 7 to 8 to 10ish for first interview, and obviously we then narrow that list down again, Thomasina, by the time you get to the second interview. So yeah, there is a little bit of competition in there.
I've just seen the question from Amy come in. Has anyone combined the scholarship with the CPD funding from their employer? Yes, I believe so. I can't remember off the top of my head it was, but I believe that has been done. I also was paid for 4 weeks whilst I was there, and then took 2 weeks on annual leave, and they paid me as part of my CPD. So yeah, again, it's about having those conversations with your employer, but that has been done by